Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, many farmers are fighting corn rootworms and the pressure is growing, and some of them are becoming resistant to single trait rootworm stacks. So all of a sudden we've got resistant rootworms, we've got to use insecticide again. And you know what, Brent? Some of those insecticides have interaction with herbicides. We'll talk about those on today's show.
Well, the thing I wanted to get to is in soybeans, we're seeing so many problems with Roundup resistant weeds now that the pre-emerge herbicides have become more important than ever. We want to talk about some of the reasons why.
Well, I've also got a tough to control weed of the week today, but first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to discuss exactly what farming on the contour means.
Well, maybe that'll be a good discussion for you, Brian. You know, we're looking up this hillside. Now, granted, it's not that big a hill, but our rows are running straight up the hill here, Brian.
Yep, but okay, so first of all, what farming on the contour is basically you're farming around the hill. So if you're on the side of the hill, you're farming around it. So the water, when it's flowing down the hill, will get stopped as it's coming down by all these rows, instead of farming up and down the hills where the water can basically just follow your rows right down the hill. But the problem is, if you've got hills going all different directions, how can you possibly farm on the contour that way?
Well, it's tough to do just perfectly, but when we talk about farming on the contour, it's one of those things that farmers can do to help prevent erosion on their farms. When we look at erosion, when you've got rows that run straight up the hill, like we've got here, we actually got caught. I mean, this is one of those fields that the hills go every which way. So on the other side of the farm, we're going right across the side of the hill, so we're doing things right. But we've got this one little hill here that we had to go over the top, otherwise it would have been chaos out in the field. So we've got this little part of the field. We happened to get a great big rain shortly after we planted this year. What happened? We had a little bit of erosion in a couple of spots right down the row. So to try and avoid that, many farmers try to plant around the sides of the hills. That way they have those corn stalks or bean plants or whatever crop they're planting. Try and catch some of that water, slow it down, and keep the water on the hillside where it raises better crops.
Well, keep the dirt on the hillside too, so it doesn't wash down to the bottom of the hill. But the whole thing is, as a farmer, it's a lot easier to just farm everything one direction. I mean, it makes it simple, everything is square, you can make good time. So if you're trying to farm a lot of acres, it's hard to do this farming on the contour method. So that's one of the things that farmers are weighing out all the time is, how much time am I going to invest and is it worth it compared to the soil that I could potentially lose? So that's why you see in very slight slopes, most farmers aren't farming on the contour, but where you get steeper slopes, that's where farming on the contour really pays.
Well, one thing, Brand, there are certain crops that it's really nice to plant along the contour of the hill. That way you've got one row that's standing up a little taller than the next, and as far as getting sunlight into the crop, it works pretty effectively. Where if you're planting straight up and down up the hill, now you may have, depending on which way the sun is, if you're in north-south rows or east-west rows, it may work out okay or it may not. So I kind of like that about stair-stepping the plants going up the hill. It works really nice in vineyards, so you have one row of vines that's up just a little bit higher, so you get more sunlight and get those berries ripe just at the right time, that kind of thing. It can work well.
Well, once again, farming on the contour is basically farming around the hill rather than up and down the hills. It's very important in terms of holding water and holding soil back towards the top of the hill and overall reducing erosion.
Well, one other thing that's good to stop erosion is keeping our weeds under control with herbicides rather than having to do all kinds of tillage to get them under control. We'll show you which herbicides can stop this week's weed coming up later in the show.
Harvest season will soon be over, but don't put away your equipment until you bring it into Titan Machinery, your Case IH dealer. Take advantage of our Uptime Maintenance program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance service designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short working season. Our technicians average more than 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive checklist to find problems before they slow you down. Call Titan Machinery today to schedule your Uptime service so you can spend the winter worry-free. Titan Machinery and Case IH. Better solutions.
Hey Brian, it's Farm Guy.
What brings you to our farm?
I watch Ag PhD every week and know that you guys do a lot of field testing.
We test a lot of products here, and when something works, we use it on our farm.
Oh, like agriculture liquid fertilizers. You guys started talking about ProGerminator and SureK on the show a few years ago.
But I was skeptical.
You're always skeptical.
Should Brian be skeptical of agro-liquid fertilizers? Find out at www.farmguytv.com.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature, and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Now that we're starting to see some rootworms, or actually a lot of rootworms, that have become resistant to single trait BTs, insecticides have really gotten popular again, these soil insecticide products like Aztec, Force, Counter, Capture. But the problem is there can be interaction with the insecticides and the herbicides that you might use on your farm that could end up hurting your yield.
Well, back in the 1990s, this was always part of the discussion when we were doing crop plans for farmers. Hey, pay attention to which products you're using here, because one that you use pre-emerge could interact with the insecticide that you're using, or one that you're applying post-emerge several months later could still have an interaction with that pre-emerge insecticide you're using.
Like Counter, for example, insecticide, and Accent herbicide. I saw one field one time that was just completely devastated. It looked like you took a torch to it. It was crazy, and it was all because of this interaction, and I didn't really realize how bad it was going to be. I knew the warnings and everything, and I got a call one day and a farmer said, hey, why don't you take a look at this? I said, whoa, you're not going to get much yield after you did that. And then I found out he'd use Counter down, he'd use Accent post.
Well, the problem is this is all happening like one whole generation ago, it seems like, and now we're dealing with young agronomists that haven't seen this before. We're also dealing with young farmers that may never have considered it before. I talk to farmers every day that have never used an insecticide, and they say, wow, I thought corn rootworm was going to be under control just for my traits. Now I've got an issue. And you know, many of those guys are turning to Smart Stack traits, and that's great. The problem is there isn't enough Smart Stacks to go around for every single acre in the country
plus
this
the
year.
fact that the bug still has to take a bite out of that plant before it's going to die. And if there are so many rootworms out there, that's a lot of bites, and you're still going to have some yield loss. So a lot of guys, even with Smart Stacks, like on our farm, we're still going to use at least a half rate of insecticide and maybe even a full rate. So anyway, let's get specific into this. Which insecticides are we concerned about, and which herbicides are we concerned about?
Well, when it comes to insecticides, you know, the ones that we've really liked in terms of dry are Aztec and also Force. Now with Force, that's strictly a pyrethroid, and we don't see an interaction with that pyrethroid with different herbicides. We really haven't seen a big issue as far as if you're using Force, you can't use this herbicide or that one. It's when we get into other products that we see an issue. Counter is probably the biggest one.
Okay, so Counter is by far the worst. That's an organophosphate, but it's also systemic. Now, other organophosphates would include Lorsban and most of what makes up Aztec. So we still have some concerns with Lorsban and Aztec, but it's much, much worse with Counter. Then if you go to the herbicide side, what we're worried about here is mainly ALS products, but we're also to some degree concerned about the HPPDs, things that turn weeds white like Callisto, Laudus, Impact, Armazon, those types of products.
Now these herbicides could be used pre-emerge. They could be soil applied products that you're putting on around planting time, or they could be post-emerge products. And this gets to be a challenge because a lot of times we have short-term memory. We don't remember what we did 3 months ago out in the field. It's just, all right, I have this weed, I need to control it. What's my best option? That's not the case anymore. Now you have to look at your full cropping plan of what insecticide did I use, what pre did I use, and I don't want to get into trouble here with any of these products.
Yep, so for example, when I was running through the list of Callisto, Laudus, Impact, and Armazon, these HPPDs. I kind of forgot about Balance Flex. That's a pre-emerge product that is an HPPD. It's the same kind of thing with the ALS herbicides. You sure think about Accent that you could use post-emerge or Beacon, but did you remember that, oh yeah, Python is an ALS product, and Python is going to be found in Triple Flex and Sure Start. So now I'm concerned about those products too. So here's what I will tell farmers. You've got to decide on one end or the other. Do you love a certain insecticide? Maybe you love Counter because you got some nematodes out there. You say, man, this stuff's the best. I'm absolutely using Counter. That's fine. Now you're just limited on what you can use for herbicide.
Well, hold on. It may not be that you love Counter so much. It may be, you know what? My dealer was out of Force and he was out of Aztec.
That's why you got to order
Counter was my
early.
next best choice.
Why you got to order early.
Well, here's the challenge though. There's supply shortages with those dry insecticides because the demand has gone up so much that the manufacturers have not kept up.
Okay, so I want to come back to pick your products. So if, let's say on the herbicide side, you say, man, Sure Start's been fantastic. I'm absolutely using Sure Start this coming year. That's fine, not a problem at all. You can use one of the pyrethroids insecticides. You've got Capture Liquid, or you've got Force Dry, or even there's Force Liquid that's available too. So you've got those options, and I would stay away from the organophosphates. Now, I also get some pushback from some of these big companies, and they say, well, there's not a lot of problem with my product and this other one over here. If it's one of the weaker herbicide ones and one of the weaker insecticide ones, not a big risk. But for me, I still really don't want to take my chances. I'd rather not use any organophosphate when I'm using any ALS or HPPD herbicide.
Well, to sum things up, when you're using a soil-applied insecticide, read the label. Talk to an agronomist. Find out which products you can use and which products you can't use for weed control later on in the season so you don't have a negative interaction within your plant that could rob your yield or even kill the corn
What
plant.
this all comes down to, and the reason why we're talking about it today, is we want you to think ahead. Because again, like Darren said earlier, if you just make a choice on insecticide, well, now you may have really limited your herbicide choices, or vice versa. So be planning ahead, think this thing through, and talk to your agronomist.
One other thing you want to talk to an agronomist about is our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving in rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier and less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seed so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Advanced Farming Systems from Case IH helps producers be ready. Our precision farming solution is less complex and built right into our equipment. Factory integrated with open architecture, AFS works with all of your implements, no matter what color they are. And our team of dedicated specialists are here to keep you rolling 24/7, 365. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
Soybean Pre-Emerge herbicides have never been more important because now we have Roundup resistant weeds, we have HPPD resistant weeds, we've got ALS resistant weeds. So a lot of the post options, Darren, they're out. They're just not working well.
I don't know if I could say that they've never been more important though, because you know what, before we had a lot of those herbicide choices, we had to do a great job with our pre's. That was our only hope. We had Sencor and we had Treflan.
Well,
If they didn't work, we had to walk the beans.
Okay, I guess you got me there. But I will say this, at least we have a lot more options today when it comes to pre-emerge herbicides. But we do want you to consider some of the old products, some of the things you maybe haven't even thought about in years, like the DNA products, the yellows. Let's start there.
Well, when you talk about Treflan, Sonalan, and Prowl, they are pretty reliable products. Now, I realize your dad or your grandpa may say, oh, I had that one product fail that one time. You know what? If you use the right rate, you get them out there, you get a little bit of moisture on them, you're going to have a great response from Treflan, Sonalan, or Prowl. Now with Treflan and Sonalan, they must be instantly incorporated. And when we see a failure with those products, which I have virtually never seen, it's always with the guy that sprayed them on and then came back later to work them in. And when you have products like that that have high vapor pressure, you just can't do that. Because if you have a hot, sunny day, maybe a little breeze, you're gonna lose a lot of that product and waste your money and waste your time. So when you're doing that, we like to put an incorporation kit right on a disc or a field cultivator or whatever tillage tool you're gonna use. So we're spraying it on and literally working it in as we're spraying it on. That way you're maximizing the effectiveness of those products. With Prowl, that can be used in no-till. So you could spray that on and just leave it on the surface of the soil and it's going to be just fine.
The nice thing about these yellows, the DNA products, they have activity on grass and they have pretty good activity on broadleaves. Even some of the toughest broadleaves that are out there, Palmer pigweed, water hemp, even a little bit on ragweed, we have some activity on a lot of those weeds. But I also want you to keep in mind there is a difference. The reason why Sonalan is the most expensive is it's the best. And it doesn't have the carryover issue that Treflan does. So Sonalan and Prowl are not going to carry over as much as Treflan will. But we do encourage you to use at least one of these three products on most of your soybean acres if you can, because it's a good way to get a cheap grass and broadleaf killer out there, and it's a completely different mode of action than the rest of the products we'll discuss.
All right, well, I like two newer products to the market, Valor and Authority. Those products are fantastic, they're broad spectrum, and now they're being packaged with other herbicides in combination with them. So in many cases, like let's take Authority for example, you can buy it with Sencor mixed in, that's Authority MTZ. You can buy it with Pursuit mixed in, that's Authority Assist. You can buy it with First Rate mixed in, that's Authority First. Well, if you pick one of those products, like I like Authority MTZ, say use Authority MTZ in combination with Prowl, now you have three modes of action, all with activity on your Palmer pigweed or water hemp species. Wow, that's a great way to start your program out, and you really haven't broken the bank to do it.
Okay, let's talk about the Valor and Authority just a little bit more. The reason why we like those products is they don't have quite as much soil pH activity as like the old Sencor did. So Sencor, if you get soil pH above 7.4, that product can get really hot. It could get harmful to your soybean crop or any crop that you're going to raise if the pH is excessive and the rate is, pretty high. So with Valor and Authority, we can kind of solve that problem. You don't have to worry so much about pH. They're going to control similar weed species to what Sencor does. I like both Valor and Authority because they have pretty decent residual, more than what Sencor does too. Authority is by far going to have the longest residual though, so if you're just strictly looking at residual, Authority would be number one and Valor would be number two, but both are going to be real good on a lot of the small-seeded broadleaves.
When you talk about small-seeded broadleaves, but with Sencor, it does have some activity on those large-seeded broadleaves as well.
Like now, sunflowers.
Yeah, back before we had a lot of herbicide choices, we'd use Sencor on our farm, and we were hoping to get sunflower control, maybe a little help on velvet leaf. Got a little bit of activity on cockleburr, but cockleburr is a little bit tougher broadleaf to get.
Okay, so we've mentioned quite a few products already, but we haven't gotten to a couple of the real popular ones, like Pursuit, for example, especially at a low rate. We don't encourage you to use a high rate of Pursuit hardly ever because we're worried about carryover, but a low rate is pretty good, still has a lot of activity on a number of different weeds, ragweed, buckwheat. There are a whole bunch of them, even lamb's quarters I can think of, that Pursuit's going to help you on in addition to grass. Again, keep the rate low and be thinking about soil pH here too. Low pH is what we're most worried about. If you had a pH less than 5.5, that's where I'd be most concerned about carryover. It's not high pH with Pursuit. I also think about two products that could be used pre, but I want to save them for post, and that would be First Rate and FlexStar. And so there are combinations like Darren mentioned, Authority first. I really don't like using that. I'd rather save that First Rate for post-emerge. I think that's a better way to go. You've got other options you could use pre-emerge for those same weeds. Same thing when we start talking about FlexStar. I've got other options for the weeds FlexStar will control pre-emerge. I just don't have a lot of options post, so save that FlexStar for post.
Okay, Brian, we've covered a lot of ground here, but here's the most important questions. How are you going to get these products on, and when are you going to get these products on?
Well, it depends on what we're going to use. So if I am going to take a Treflan or Sonalan, then I have to incorporate.
Well, okay, that's fine. If you've got incorporation, you can go right up to that planting date. That's no problem. What I'm concerned about is those ones that you lay on top of the soil.
Yep.
This is where we see a lot of questions from guys. I don't know, I haven't had great success with the pre's. And I said, well, when did you put them on? Well, I planted, and then a week later, I put on my pre, and it didn't rain for a couple weeks, and all of a sudden all the weeds came
Yeah,
up.
but here's the other problem. A lot of guys will say, oh, I'm going to wait until after I plant. That's great, but you might only have 3 days. Are you really going to get that done? Most of them, you can't use it post. Once the crop gets up, you'll kill it. So the stuff like Sencor, Authority, Valor, Treflan, Sonalan, Prowl, none of those, they're fantastic pre's, but you cannot use them early post-emerge.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things to think about with soybean weed control, but we really think those pre-emerge herbicides are absolutely critical to your success, and especially if you've got Roundup resistant weeds in your area, you need to be using multiple pre-emerge herbicides to try and wipe out as many of the broadleaf weeds especially before you have to try and control them.
Well, that is important when you're trying to control weeds, but will any of those things control our Weed of the Week? We'll tell you coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Mandaco.
For lower costs and higher production, Mandaco leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Well, the first time I saw our Weed of the Week, Virginia Groundcherry, it was on the opposite side of this field, Brian. I remember as kids, we just started to see some black nightshade coming into our area, and our dad said, hey guys, when you're out walking those beans, make sure you watch out for black nightshade. I hear it's a really bad one. So we saw this weed that we'd never seen before. It turned out to be Virginia Groundcherry. We said, oh yeah, Dad, there's a terrible patch of black nightshade out in that field, and Dad got all concerned. So he drove out to the field, looked at it, and he said, that's not black nightshade, that's Virginia Groundcherry.
Well, either weed is not good to have in your soybean field. You don't want that stuff. With Virginia Groundcherry, it's a perennial weed, so that's what makes control especially tough. And what are you going to do with it in soybeans? Because, about the only thing that I've seen that has control, Sencor has some activity pre-emerge. Authority and Valor can burn it down, but I don't know if you're actually going to control much. But what do you do post-emerge if you see it?
This is where Roundup Ready soybeans have come into play. And when we can use a high rate of Roundup out in the soybeans safely, that's the best way to deal with perennial weeds. The other thing that I would say is you can do fall treatments. Now, obviously, it's getting a little bit late, especially in the northern part of the country. But if you're further in the south and you do have this particular weed, you could do a fall treatment and do a nice job after the crop comes off and you have some good regrowth. You could fry it down in the fall and never have to see it again.
Using maybe Banvel or 2,4-D, something like that.
So there are some different options, but keep in mind when you have perennial weeds, we prefer not to have tillage out there because once you break up that root system, a lot of times you get more weeds popping up. We'd prefer to leave the root system intact. Try to kill it roots and all. You can use something like 2,4-D or Banvel in the fall, or you can use Roundup in a spring burn down.
In corn, Status would probably be the best choice there, but again, it's a perennial, so it's going to be a little tough. Make sure you're using a good strong rate. In wheat, we don't generally see a lot of problem with Virginia Groundcherry because generally speaking, the wheat will choke that Groundcherry out. Groundcherry does not get real tall.
Well, in wheat, I can already hear people thinking, oh boy, I guess I'll just use 2,4-D. You were talking about that in a burn down situation. 2,4-D can be hard on your wheat. I don't recommend that. I'd much rather see you use Husky. You'll do a much better job burning that weed back, especially if you bump your Husky up to the higher labeled rate.
Well, once again, our Weed of the Week is Virginia Groundcherry. We've seen it on our own farm for years. Hopefully you haven't seen it on yours because it is a perennial weed and it can be a little bit difficult to control, especially in certain crops like soybeans.
That's all time we have for this week's weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Advanced farming systems from Case IH helps producers be ready. AFS is less complex and built right into our equipment. And our team of dedicated specialists are here to keep you rolling. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
Getting drain tile installed is great, but what about those mounds that are left afterwards? In today's Iron Talk, we'll discuss how how you can solve them yet this fall. If you put some drainage tile in this fall, you've got some big mounds out there in your fields, depending of course on what the soil conditions were as you were installing the tile. One thing that we've done on our farm is to drive our tractor back along the side of those trenches. You can't drive directly on top of the trench because you can't pack that soil down right on top of the line. It's dangerous to do and you're going to run into problems doing it. But you can kind of push some of the soil that got displaced back into that trench just a little bit, and then of course you could do some light tillage over the top. For the most part, much of that soil will settle back down by spring. Especially if you get some rainfall in the spring, much of that mound is going to be completely gone by next fall. However, you will have 1 year that you've got to deal with a little bit of an extra mound every place that you ran your tile line. That's okay. It's 1 year's inconvenience for many years of benefit. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
You can't fill a barrel any fuller than its lowest stave, and your crops can't do any better than the nutrient that's in shortest supply. Your yield potential is only as good as the weakest nutrient in your fertilizer program. Give your crops more than just NPK. Prescription apply all the micronutrients your crop needs, each one customized for your crop's potential. MicroLink, linking yield to potential.
For lower costs and higher production, see your Mandaco dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandaco, simple design for easy transport and easy use. 12 to 62 foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 by 3/8 inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandaco land rollers. Improved soil to seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss. Eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandaco dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
Advanced farming systems from Case IH helps producers be ready. Our precision farming solution is less complex and built right into our equipment. Factory integrated with open architecture, AFS works with all of your implements, no matter what color they are. And our team of dedicated specialists are here to keep you rolling 24/7, 365. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
Introducing the all-new Backsaver Swing Hopper Auger Mover. Backsavers have interchangeable parts which allows you easy access to move or swing your augers to fit your harvesting needs. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's show, but be sure to tune in again next time for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Organic matter improves soil structure and tilth. It improves microbial activity and soil life. Organic matter allows soils to hold more water and nutrients for your crop. To learn more about building it, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.